right, well, welcome everyone to the third and final session of our series on stories of personal mission. The purpose of this series is to hear a little bit of the backstory on how people got involved with a particular project over some period of time. So it's not so much about the project itself as about how we got involved in that. And I would remind us that I could have asked any of you to come and tell your story of how you got involved with someone, some issue or project that was important to you. But today we have Mark Hoebelheinrich and Mary Trollinger here with us to talk about their particular involvement, in case of Mark with Sweepstall House and Mary with the Mental Health Task Force. And so we're looking forward to hearing a little bit of those stories. I'll offer us a scripture as sort of inspiration from 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 4 through 7. There are different kinds of spiritual gifts, but the same Spirit gives them. There are different ways of serving, but the same Lord is served. There are different abilities to perform service, but the same God gives ability to all for their particular service. The Spirit's presence is shown in some way in each person for the good of all. So, again, Mary and Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. The first question I have for you is, and you all are involved in different groups, so we'll kind of bounce back and forth and figure it out as we go along. But I want to hear a little bit about kind of the backstory on how you got involved with your particular thing. So Mary, if you'd be willing to start us off, like, how did you get into this mental health task force thing? What's the story?
Well, really, I was invited to be involved by the task force as it had been formed and applied for the grant that they applied for. You would have to ask them why they asked me. I'm still very surprised that they asked me. They might regret it, but I'm glad that they did. Very still surprised and honored that they did. And I had just, that was back in January, I guess. So it's been almost a year. And just prior to that, I had been become a deacon. It was kind of a time in my life when I was getting back into being more involved in church life and spiritual life and ministry. I've, throughout my life, been probably not strong enough a word of call, but like led to or wanted to do some kind of ministry. And then have, the closer I get to it, think, no, that's I'm probably not right for that. That's not for me. But I did go to divinity school and thought I would become a chaplain, go back and get my chaplain certification, and life has just led me elsewhere. But I have also, I'm perfectly fine talking about, I've dealt with my own mental health struggles, especially right after divinity school. Just realizing that chaplaincy probably wasn't right for me was difficult, and just was a bumpy road, but led me to the realization that you can do ministry without having minister or in your job title or job description. So I've been fortunate to do lots of different interesting things. I also work at Greenhouse 17, which is a domestic violence shelter and agency in Central Kentucky. So yeah, just lots of different reasons why I wanted to be involved. You would have to ask them why they asked me to be involved, but I'm very, very glad that they did. So.
Okay. Very good. So Mark, can you tell us how you got into Sweepstall House?
Sure. So I think it was about 8 or 9 years ago when Sarah and I moved to Danville. Sarah took a position as a professor at Center College, and we had been members while we were both in grad school in Iowa. We were members of a Presbyterian church there in Ames, Iowa. And when we came here, we kind of needed to find a church home, and well, we're Presbyterian, so we might as well go to the Presbyterian church. And we started to attend, and then we quickly transferred our membership. And I believe one of the first things we did when we became members is we kind of filled out a form of interest, things that we might want to get involved in. And we filled it out, and one of them that we had heard about was Soups on Us. I think at that point we hadn't gone to a Saturday or done any of the Soups on Us activities, but we filled it out, and I think within pretty much filling it out, Ken Kopp read it, and he immediately came up and approached me and said, hey, you know, we're always looking for drivers. Would you at least want to be on a backup role, or just come on a Saturday? And so I think Sarah and I, the next Saturday, were like, yeah, sure, we'll come. I don't think we started delivering at that time. at least right away, but we did start to see what the process was, and we really liked it. It was, Saturday mornings, we didn't have kids, so it was like we're up and we were able to come, and it was always such a great sense of community. And then eventually Ken needed someone to drive, so Sarah and I would pick a route and we would go, and it was a great opportunity. We had not lived in Danville that long, and we thought we knew the community, but when you do a route or you do multiple routes for Soups on Us, you really do see that there's a whole nother part of Danville you rarely ever get to see, and a whole group of people you may not actually interact with on a day-to-day basis. So that was really, I think, powerful for us, and we did multiple routes. We would continue to do that, and then Ken, in a way to kind of offload some of his responsibilities because they were traveling more, asked if I would help find delivery drivers when he was unavailable. And so I think probably 6 months to a year later, there I was trying to round up drivers, which is always pretty easy in the end. But again, I got to see the different groups that could come in and help deliver and meet people. So, and we've been doing it pretty faithfully for 8 or 9 years at least. So
yeah. So I mean, Mark, when you had kids, that could have been a sort of an easy moment to jump off and sort of do another thing. What kept you going on this particular thing? Like, why was it important?
Well, I have a great wife, so she would definitely, if she wasn't able to go, especially when the kids were really little or when they were first born, she may have stayed home more with them. But I think we just enjoyed it. I love the sense of community. I mean, the people who work through Soups on Us through all the processes, from organizing it with Amy and the routes, to the group that orders the food and prepares it, and then the different groups that come in to help put it together. It's just always, when you come, you feel fulfilled, and you get, in a lot of ways, more out of it than you give back. So we've just kept with it. So.
And so, Mary, again, maybe you could tell us a little bit more. You've had these sort of several different ministries that are all kind of weaving together for you. And so how, can you maybe give us a little bit more about the mental health task force in particular, and kind of like what your vision is there and how you see these other things pointing you that way? Yeah. So the task force, I'm so glad that it came about. I don't know how I missed the first the Comfort My People study that was done in 2020. I wasn't living in Danville. I was still living in Lexington last summer. But I'm so glad that it happened. And you might have to repeat the question. I just got caught up in my head.
Yeah.
So again, like, maybe tell us a little bit more about your kind of vision, like how your things come together and how you see that going forward. Okay, yes. How it came together, how I see it going forward. Well, I was really fortunate, talking about Greenhouse 17, I guess, for a second. That also kind of started out with my desire to give back, because I started there as a VISTA, which is a volunteer in service to America. So I wanted to do a year of service. I was really fortunate that they had an opening for that almost 4.5 years ago now. And then it just kind of has kept on. I was fortunate that a job opened up after that, and I've been able to stay there in various roles. And for the domestic violence sphere, I was really fortunate to not have that in my life. But I see how it connects with mental health type of things. For the survivors that we serve, lots of mental health needs just to keep on the journey toward healing. Yeah, it's just, I guess I just want to keep learning as much as I can. Also with the mental health task force, I was fortunate to not know much about substance use and misuse, which is a part of what we do, and also was not a part of Danville that I was really aware of, that it is a problem here. It's kind of just a ignorance that I was, just blissfully unaware of, but it's very present and very real. And this year is the first year that I've also lost people I went to school with, due to, people that I was close with in school, to overdoses. So there's just like a lot of things that just happened to come together this year for me. I'm not sure I had any part in it at all, but I'm just really fortunate that it's all kind of weaving together. And for the future, I hope that it can just continue that way, so I can keep learning and serving however. Our grant term for the mental health, the grant that we received through the Presbyterian Church ends in January, February, but I think all of us have a real desire to continue the the group and the work that we're doing. We've developed a real partnership with Raw Place, which is a residential facility for people with serious mental illness here in Danville. Sean helped establish a garden there, community garden, that's been really successful. So even after the grant ends, I hope I can still continue to be part of the task force and just continue on that ministry, because it's so needed, especially during the pandemic. That's another thing that's really just been the numbers that we see of mental health crises and diagnoses for the past almost 2 years now, I guess, just really going up. So it's definitely a need for people to know that there are services that they can receive professionally, but also churches and people who care about them and want them to be well. So yeah.
And so you very modestly commented that you don't know why the church called you to be the sort of chair of this, but now that you're here, what skills and gifts do you think that you already had that you're kind of bringing to this work, really both with Mental Health Task Force and with Greenhouse 17?
Sure. What skills do I have? Great question. I'm gonna have to get over was what you call my humility and think about that. I did, attend divinity school, so I have some background I took at least one pastoral care and counseling class, so that helped me out. But I think also I worked as a chaplain intern at a nursing home, continuous care facility, when I was in school in Nashville, and that just gave me at least a little bit of a taste of ministry and just the services that you can provide and what people need. But it also gave me a glimpse into what ministers and caregivers need as well in terms of their own mental health needs. So, and that's something I realized with like compassion fatigue and just boundaries and not taking it home with you every day and lying in bed and thinking, oh my gosh, there's so much that people need. And that is one of the reasons that I did not go on to become a chaplain yet. Maybe someday we'll see. But I guess just that background and knowledge of both sides of people who need care and people who are providing care all have mental health needs and ministry needs. I guess that's a skill or experience. Yeah, with Greenhouse 17, I don't do direct service. I'm not, and we call our advocates at the shelter who work with the survivors, but I do development and communications, and so also just learning how to communicate with people, I guess, is a good skill. I do pieces for our newsletter, our church newsletter, and yeah, I think that's all I can really think of for what I might bring to it.
So Mark, sort of same question. Do you, again, tell us a little bit about what skills and gifts you had that have been helpful in your Sweepstall House work?
I think one of the biggest ones is just in my own career and profession is a lot of analyzing and processes and analyzing costs, or just like how efficient a facility is working. And it is, in a lot of ways, it's kind of nerdy for me, but to go to Soups on Us, you see a lot of things going on, and there's a lot of, again, behind the scenes work to order the food, to get it put together the day before, and then you never know who's going to show up. It may not be, you may have a large group, you may have the center swim team, which will probably be here this next Saturday, or for the Saturday in December, and they'll have the food done in 10 minutes because they're young, they're fast, there's a ton of them. Or you might have a small group because it's a holiday and there's not a lot of people around, but the process is kind of fun to watch. And on my side of it, if I am organizing the group of drivers, it's being able to see what routes fit best for certain people. We have some that are more demanding, or you have to drive further out, or you have to go to, say, Arnold Towers, and you might want more than one person to help navigate where all the rooms are. And so I just always appreciated the process. And for my gift wise is I like to just be present. I like one of the biggest things I can do to help with Soups on Us is just being there consistently, and there's kind of that like well, Mark will be there, or Ken will be there, and then some of the others. Amy Wilson is always going to be there to make sure that the meals get made and they get sent out. So that's what I've always appreciated about it.
So, Mark, where do you see the Holy Spirit at work in Sweepstall House?
I think you definitely see it. There's a certain group that's always, again, I talk about it, but they're there. They're very committed. And it changes. Some people have moved away or passed away, but you can really see that sense of community, where you can see God at work, and people are there, and it's joyful. If you come to Soups on Us on a Saturday, people are happy. I mean, they're talking and communicating. Even during COVID, when we had, more restrictions and even didn't have Soups on Us, we quickly got back into it, and that joy that people get, you can see there's that community, and people really, are doing God's work and are feeding. There's a need, and they're feeding the people, and that's what I think God has called us to do, is to help.
So Mary, similar question. How do you see the Holy Spirit in your work?
Well, I have to say the people who are on the task force with me do so much here in the church and in the community. I'm just blown away by their commitment and the energy and time that they put into serving others. So I definitely see the Holy Spirit in those people and what they do. And then also just I believe I see the Holy Spirit working to change some perceptions about mental health type of things. Heard a lot during the pandemic about, again, which I had heard before, I had hoped it had kind of stopped, but about you won't get sick, or you don't need a vaccine or things like that if you have enough faith or if you pray more. That's something I've heard a lot about mental health type things as well. It's equally dangerous, I believe, for physical health and mental health. So I think I see some changes in that, though, with the broader population. I think because the pandemic caused so many people, brought on more either new mental health struggles or increased them for a lot of people. So just seeing that there's more of a kind of talking about it out in the open, and being okay with it, and having our church and other churches have these kinds of ministries to show that it's not something we have to keep in the closet, not talk about, keep behind closed doors, and that you're not farther from God in this. God is with you and walking with you and lifting you up and being there with you in your struggles. So.
Yeah, that kind of leads into my next question: is what have you learned about who God is from this work? So the presence nearby.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely, and not someone who a being who grows farther away in your time of need, because there are, I think, a lot of questions of like, why is this happening, and you do feel alone, but yes, I think God is there with you and present with you in your struggle, but also with you in your healing.
So Mark, similar question: in what has your work in Soups on Us taught you about who God is?
I think for me, when it comes to Soups on Us, it's a loving God. And so when you do a route, and say it's a new one, and you're trying to figure out where you go, God is with you, because you don't want to, you might not know where you're at. Your GPS may not be working. If you go out to the Junction City route, you might be way out of your comfort zone. And I always felt like when we were doing it, God was with us, and He was protecting us and helping us do, the right thing by helping people. The people you get to meet, sometimes you don't even see them, sometimes you do, or, they're always very happy to see you. Sometimes you get to chat and have a conversation, but you're really just showing people what the church and God can do. And it happens every week, because we're one of 4 churches that do this. And so there's always this continuous, kind of a feedback loop of every week. If you're on that route, you're going to get to see those people, and they're going to see the churches in this community doing that work.
So for everyone else, do you have questions for Mark or Mary about the work that they've been doing?
I have one for Mary. I know you said that the funding that will be ending in January, February. Is that something that is able to be renewed, or is it kind of was a one-time?
Great question. Something that we are looking into because we aren't quite sure of that ourselves. So, but it does come from the National Presbyterian Church. They have a office of mental health now, which is really exciting. And so I think people are applying for grants again. And we're looking into that. So we'll see about the money, but the work will continue either way. So, yeah.
Could we roll that into our local mission spectrum?
I think so, absolutely. Yeah, I don't see why that wouldn't be.
What's the name of that lady there on the housing development there on Lexington Avenue? What's her name? She's hilarious.
Yeah,
I can't remember her name.
I can't remember her name either. I know
she's the one who always asks you for $5. Has a different story every week.
Yeah.
That's great.
I think for our drivers, we have and Preston is one of them, and Spencer has helped deliver many times. Even for our driver teams, it's a dedicated group, and we'll reach out to others as needed, but we have a pretty decent email list, and it usually gets filled up quickly. I mean, if people are around, they're very dedicated to help deliver, and it's very helpful as someone trying to organize it. And but I think there's a lot of people, like, the only time I see them is for that. They come and they pick up the meals and they go deliver them.
So. I've got a question mark. So for myself, I find, like, when I've had experiences that I haven't had before, it opens my eyes up to this experience, but then eventually, because of that, it starts to open my eyes up to the wider questions. So is there ways in which your involvement in Sweepstall House has sort of opened you up to think beyond just the neighbors you're serving directly, but around issues of food insecurity or?
Sure. I mean, I think I mentioned it when we first started. I never realized the potential poverty or the poverty that was in Boyle County. I lived in my little bubble, and really that's what doing those routes. And then even where I work today, it's got a pretty diverse group of people working there that are in and out, and it does open your eyes to see that it's not just me sitting even here at the church. It's a lot going on, and with what Mary sees on the task force and stuff like that. So it definitely made me, in a way, be less selfish on my own and think of others. So.
I know that in the past, Meals on Wheels we have delivered, and that program has gone. I'm not sure how that is delivered now, or if it's still going, but it's great that we're continuing with this. I think
Meals on Wheels, Spencer, you do stuff for Meals on Wheels or not?
I haven't in a couple of years.
Okay.
As far as is it still being run through the gathering place?
I thought so.
That's where it was at that time, and I know they had some kind of hiccups with funding, but
I think
still
they're
there.
back though. I think.
This
Yeah,
whole,
Kathy Howells, I think, is.
the whole spectrum
Spearheads
of
that.
food insecurity and how we respond is something that I need to understand better. I mean, we have blessing boxes, and we've got Salvation Army thing, and we've got this, and I can't put it all together in my.
One, we've noticed from a Soups on Us perspective, our numbers are down. I mean, from delivering that you may have done 50 to 80 meals, and now it might be 20 or 30. So something has either helped or I mean, it's gone from 400 to 500 meals to now in the 200s over the last probably 6 months. So we don't know if that's a trend, and if that's a good thing. It might be that there's less need, or is it just a blip because of the pandemic, or we're not sure.
I was wondering about kids, in school being disrupted and all that, and substance abuse, and I was just, a lot of people would use the money that they would get from whatever to not serve their children, unfortunately. And are there any is there any data about any of that? And without school being in session, how difficult that must have been for children? I guess backpack for kids, is that?
I can only speak for us. We know at Boyle County would do meals even when there was, when they were out, like you could go every day and get a meal for your family. Or if they did, they would do almost a week at a time. You could get bags of milk and fresh vegetables. I mean, it was quite a bit. We participated in it a number of times just to help us get through just not having to cook a meal every single time when we had our kids home all the time for 6 months to a year, so it was helpful.
But you had to go get it.
You did have to go. No, but they did, I think, deliver. They did some delivery.
They delivered it to.
Because I think you could, the bus drivers, our bus teams would drop it off, but.
Yeah, but you had to make sure you signed up and all that stuff. So there is a little bit of a level of, you have to know these things exist and get signed up for it. And it was easy. I thought at least in our school district, they did a wonderful job of but again, there is a little, when you think about food insecurity, I think one of the things we don't often think about is the fact that you have to know the sources exist and you have to reach out and get them. And sometimes, for whatever reason, you just might not be able to do that. So, yeah, I think there is still that need. I would be curious to see the data if we have seen that. I have just heard anecdotal information from people, chatting with people, that there were more families that had fewer options for food during the pandemic. They had food, it just they didn't maybe have the variety of foods that we would want to see for children.
I think that's one of the big things, is it's not just the fact that you have access to food, it's what kind of food you have access to.
Right.
And for children, I think the thing I've learned in 12 years now in Lexington, working with food insecurity, is that our kids are growing the bodies they're going to live in for their whole lives. And so many of the kids in my neighborhood are going to grow up to be like the adults in their 40s in my neighborhood who have type 2 diabetes, who have all kinds of health issues, because like at the time when their bodies were being made, they just didn't have the nutrients that they needed to have healthier bodies. And it's because often the food that comes from food banks, it's the stuff that you can keep on a shelf. It's the stuff that it's easy to deliver. It's not fresh produce. It's not fresh fruit. It's not, frozen meat. I mean, if it is, it's like 80% fat, ground beef or whatever. And it's great that people aren't hungry, but that is not the issue. It's like mental health. It's great that people, that mental health. All of us have mental health. It's just what degree of mental health we have. And so it's not just about calories, it's about nutrients. And that's where we're failing, I think, in terms of food insecurity, is that we can deliver calories, but we seem to be incapable of delivering nutrition. And I think that's the bigger question, especially with children. Like, how do we give children access to the nutrition they need to grow bodies that will work for them, that they will be able to live in for a long time? And that's where I see the biggest disparity in terms of the resources, not the people, and that's the big question, because we can always figure out how, there's always food to be given. If you're interested in this, there is a great book called The Stop. I can't remember the authors, but it was a guy who took over a food bank in Toronto, who started questioning the food bank model and turned it into really an innovative entrepreneurial venture that ended up supporting local farmers and getting nutritious food from local farms who were trying to develop their market to people who are hungry. It's a brilliant model. And now that's what he does, is he helps communities replicate his model in small towns to huge cities like Toronto. So the book is called The Stop.
S-T-O-P.
S-T-O-P, yeah. Which I think is the name of what used to be a food bank.
There was something on the news this week. I normally don't watch the news, but I was at home and my parents watched the news about a mobile food pantry that was delivering like fresh produce, and so that helped the problem of not having it in your neighborhood. I think people were still paying us a little bit, but the woman they interviewed was like, I got, you know, several packages of meat and all of this produce for $20, you know. So things like that, innovation in that kind of realm is great. And in such a small town as Danville, it's hard to maybe think of like food deserts, but there are some stretches of town where it's like you cannot shop for fresh food there without, like you need a vehicle, and that's another problem of transportation. And,
in fact, the language has shifted from food deserts to food apartheid. That there literally is a system that is in place to keep grocery stores out of certain neighborhoods. Like, we'll never get one in our neighborhood because there aren't enough cars and there's not enough places for people to park to do that. So there is a system that says we can't have access to fresh produce in our neighborhood because we can't. And that's a systemic issue. That's not just about there aren't neighborhoods. There are, like, even when they wanted to put in a grocery store, the one that they went after was Whole Foods, which is like, that doesn't really help our neighborhood. So that's part of it. And like, you know, Preston, like, I've only been to his property once, but like that's what we need. We need places where people have access to land to grow food. Because even at Raw Place with the garden we put in there, you know, the manager of the facility says, our residents love getting out there because it's their garden. They're taking care of it. They're watering it. They're weeding it. Like, they get to pick the produce, and that's even the bigger part, because that is the mental health, and not just the physical health. Because then there is something life-giving about doing this. There's a sense of ownership. There's a sense of, we are doing this. We're producing this. It's not just being delivered to us, as important as that is. But there's also that, and I think that and as the church, like, this is us, like, we know all about the table. Like, that's the center of our life. Food literally is the thing we have to remind us of who we are, the bread and the cup. And how do we, like Preston, how do we figure out how to help more people grow their own food? And that, which it's, you know, I've been working with the organization for 12 years working on this, and it is hard work, but this is our work to do, I think, you know, because it is about mental health, it's about physical health. I love the fact that you two are sitting doing this together, because this is it. Like, it's not just physical health, it's mental health, and it's all one thing about being human flourishing. And how do we do that and do it well? And I love that this church has a history of doing that and doing it well.
Meeting new people, personal connections.
I mean,
pointed out right off.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even know Arnold Towers existed, even though I probably drove past it. And then to go in there and the church, I'm not sure how I know the worship, the committees I'm on still will serve a meal there before the pandemic, but we would once a month go in and serve. I don't think with COVID it might be a little restricted. I think we just
we're just delivering meals. We're not serving.
Like, I think we did leave when I did it. But like, when you actually serve food to them, I mean, and sit down and eat with, they don't get a lot of visitors sometimes. Some do, but I mean, some don't. This is something they look forward to, and you'll remember them. Maybe the next year, and you're like, I remember.
Yeah, you were the one that.
I was going to ask about the pandemic a little bit more, especially thinking about a lot of these things are in person ministries, and so how have you all navigated the pandemic, and what are some of the complications of that, and what are some of the strategies that we can employ to try to navigate the pandemic as it continues to go on?
I think the mental health task force was something good to come out of the pandemic. I hope that the church would have done the Comfort My People study and everything, because that's been around since like 2008. I think the Comfort My People study that the National Presbyterian Church did is the one that we used. But I think that was something good that came out of it. But at the same time, Peggy Tudor, who led our Comfort My People study, just so desperately did not want to do it virtually because there's just not that same connection. So we did wait to do it. We did it in October every Wednesday. But we had plans to do one for, you know, the presbytery, for the candidates for ministry, and those things didn't happen. So it's just, yeah, and there's other things that we had planned to do that did not happen. So we're actually at a point now where, when you asked about the grant, we're in a weird position of having money left over. So that's what we're asking about. Can we continue this grant on even after like the term ends? Because we still have things we want to do and we have money to do it with. So yeah, it's just kind of trying to go with the flow, but it's so hard because a lot of these things are so much more effective when you're, and just, yeah, it makes a difference when you're in person. So yeah, just praying that things will, that the tide will turn or something. I don't know. It's hard to know what to hope for at this point. I mean, I know what I hope for, but
yeah, I think from a Soups on Us perspective, it's hard to do Soups on Us virtually. So there was a brief period
we had
where
that frozen food.
We had a frozen food period where we were trying to navigate the logistics and the risk with the different, not knowing what COVID was going to bring. We did, I think, have a 2 or 3 month window where we have either not did the frozen meals. But since then, you know, we've taken safety protocols and kind of gotten back to more of a normal feel to it. I think the biggest difference, even maybe for Preston, would be we deliver the meals right to his pickup now. He usually shows up and
off we go.
Full service. So,
meet me at the door.
But we still make the meals. We're doing it as socially distanced as possible, but we're back together and doing it in person as best as we can.
Are there areas in these communities, like I know down on, 2nd Street, near the deaf school, seems like there's a lot of land there. I don't know who it belongs to or what, but I would think some of the people that live in that complex might, if they had a plot of land, you know, just like Sean was talking about, that they could cultivate it with some understanding, you know, teaching maybe of understanding that this is for them and this is what could be done with it and you could do for it yourself. I don't know anything about what goes on down there and if that land is available at all.
The big thing about gardening is you have to have access to water. And that's usually the trick. You can see land, but can you water it if it doesn't rain?
Yeah.
They're at Bakewood,
yes,
behind the community center. There's a pretty good sized plot, and they have had gardens there in the past. It was pretty small this year. I don't think they had a lot of people participate. You know, James Ross, he's kind of the captain of that.
Yes, good. Well,
and Rachel White was a big supporter before Tim.
Good.
Here's a commercial. United Way is sponsoring their seminar series again. I forgot the date.
Bridges Out of Poverty.
The Bridges Out of Poverty, and it's early in the month.
Yeah.
December 2, 3, 4, something like that. It's a good program. It's you don't learn everything in one seminar, but you can learn a lot.
That is true. Yes, I've done that one. It is good. Yeah,
it's not all the answers, but it is eye-opening.
Yes. And there are other things. I know Kathy does QPR for mental health stuff in the community. She does a lot of those trainings for suicide prevention, and I don't know about like mental health first aid, but there are things like that go on in the community that hopefully we can lift up and get people involved in.
One thing I've been curious about, we installed a fridge in the park at the top of our street. We're using city power, and we have Whole Foods, Panera will drop off stuff that's going out of date, but like salads that are pre-made that they, you know, that sell them when they're out of date, instead of tossing them like they normally do, they come and put them in that fridge. And I'd be curious if that's even possible.
You know,
Legally, like there's a lot of legal issues around that, but we figured it, sorted out with the city to be able to do that. And that fridge is like, I watch up there when I walk, people are always opening and looking in. I always see someone up there looking in. And that seems like something to, places to put canned goods again, but is there a way to, is that even possible? And how do we foster relationships with people who are throwing food away like that?
Well, that's hard, because our blessing boxes do get vandalized.
Yep.
And it's hard, you know, and it's easy for me to get resentful at that, to get that out of my head and say, well, that doesn't mean that need isn't there.
And it doesn't mean that the people with the
Just
need are the
because
ones
there's
doing
some
the
jerks in the
vandalizing.
world.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, yes, we had someone who was hanging out there who decided, oh, it's empty, I'll use it as a bathroom. So, I mean, there are things like that. But there's an awful lot of people who check that, and that's now part of their daily foraging to provide for their families, you know. And it's better quality food, like it's salads and vegetables and stuff. So. In fact, there was a bunch of these crazy expensive mushrooms in there once. And I was like, if they're not gone by the end of the day, come on.
Somebody needs to use these mushrooms.
Well, so again, because this is the kind of third and final episode, if you will, in our series, I want to kind of wrap up a little bit. And one way I thought we might do that is if you want to chat with your neighbor for a minute, and here's something for you to talk about. So I picked some people whose stories I wanted to hear, but each of you could, I could have picked you. If I had picked you, what would your story have been about? What would I have, what would be the thing that you would be telling us about? And so